Jimmy Hoffa did not disappear because he was careless, weak, or unaware of danger. He disappeared precisely because he understood power too well, because he had spent his entire adult life navigating systems where loyalty mattered more than law, silence mattered more than truth, and removal was often quieter than confrontation. When people talk about Jimmy Hoffa vanishing in July of 1975, they often imagine a sudden act, a violent moment, a single decision made in haste, but the reality is far more unsettling. Hoffa's disappearance was not an interruption. It was the conclusion of a process that had been unfolding slowly for years, a process driven by fear, money, and the uncomfortable reality that some men become liabilities simply by continuing to exist. Hoffa's life began far from mystery. Born in 1913 in Brazil, Indiana, he was raised in circumstances that offered little protection and no illusions. His father's death when Jimmy was still a child forced an early confrontation with instability, and that experience followed him into adulthood. When the family moved to Detroit, Hoffa entered a city defined by labor, machines, and constant motion. Detroit was not forgiving, but it was instructive. It taught him that control did not belong to those who owned factories, but to those who could stop them. As a young warehouse worker, Hoffa watched how quickly authority collapsed when deliveries failed, and how fragile management became when schedules were disrupted. These observations shaped him more than any formal education ever could. By the 1930s, Hoffa was already organizing, not out of ideology, but out of instinct. He understood leverage intuitively. He understood that unions were not moral movements, they were instruments. His ascent within the Teamsters was fast because he delivered results, and results created loyalty. By the time he reached national leadership, Hoffa had already cultivated a reputation as a negotiator who did not bluff and did not retreat. Employers feared him. Union members trusted him, law enforcement monitored him, and organized crime took interest in him, not as a subordinate, but as a man operating in parallel territory. When Hoffa became president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters in 1957, he inherited a fragmented organization and transformed it into a centralized powerhouse. He consolidated bargaining power, standardized contracts, and orchestrated the first national freight agreement, an achievement that fundamentally reshaped American transportation. Under his leadership, the Teamsters became the largest labor union in the United States, with millions of members and influence that extended into nearly every major industry. This success, however, came with consequences. Power attracts scrutiny, and scrutiny followed Hoffa relentlessly. The most controversial aspect of Hoffa's legacy was the Teamsters Pension Fund, a financial reservoir so vast that it functioned as an alternative banking system. According to federal investigators, this fund became deeply entangled with organized crime interests, financing hotels, casinos, and large construction projects, particularly in Las Vegas. Hoffa defended these arrangements by emphasizing outcomes. Projects were completed, jobs were created, returns were generated. What mattered to him was effectiveness, not appearances. To his critics, however, the pension fund represented unchecked power and institutionalized corruption. The federal government pursued Hoffa aggressively and eventually successfully. In 1967, he entered federal prison after being convicted of jury tampering, fraud, and conspiracy. Even from behind bars, Hoffa refused to relinquish control. He remained president of the Teamsters until 1971, communicating through intermediaries and planning his return. That return, however, was interrupted by politics. President Richard Nixon commuted Hoffa's sentence in December of 1971, but the commutation came with a condition. Hoffa was prohibited from engaging in any union activity until 1980. Hoffa accepted the deal publicly, but contested it privately and legally, believing it to be unjust and temporary. This restriction altered the balance of power within the Teamsters and within organized crime circles. New leadership emerged, new alliances formed. Hoffa, once indispensable, became disruptive. He attempted to reclaim influence quietly, meeting with old allies, re-establishing connections, and signaling his intention to return. These efforts alarmed individuals who had benefited from his absence. Control of the pension fund, in particular, became a central issue. According to the FBI, it was the most abused pension fund in America, and whoever controlled it controlled an enormous flow of money. By 1975, Hoffa's position was increasingly precarious. He was no longer protected by his former authority, yet he retained knowledge that made him dangerous. On July 30th of that year, Hoffa left his home in Michigan to attend what he believed would be a meeting to resolve tensions and restore balance. He arrived at the Machus Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Hills, expecting to meet Anthony Provenzano, a former Teamsters official with mafia ties, and Anthony Giacalone, a Detroit mob figure. Both men would later deny being present. Hoffa waited. He made phone calls. He expressed frustration. Witnesses saw him pacing the parking lot. And then, sometime that afternoon, he accepted a ride. He was never seen again. No struggle was reported. No witnesses heard raised voices. His car remained unlocked. His belongings were undisturbed. What followed was one of the most exhaustive investigations in American history, involving local police, state authorities, and the FBI. Leads emerged and collapsed. Informants spoke and recanted. Search sites multiplied. Hoffa was declared legally dead in 1982, but no body was ever recovered. Over the decades, rumors placed his remains beneath stadiums, in remote fields, in industrial sites, and in incinerators. None were confirmed. What remains is not a single unanswered question, but a constellation of them. Who ordered the act? Who carried it out? Where it occurred? And why, after so many years, certainty remains elusive? The prevailing belief among investigators is that Hoffa was murdered by individuals connected to organized crime who feared his return to power. His death, if that is what occurred, was efficient, final, and intentionally invisible. In a world governed by silence, disappearance can be the cleanest solution. Jimmy Hoffa's legacy endures not because he vanished, but because his disappearance revealed the limits of accountability in systems built on influence rather than law. He was a man who understood how power truly functioned in America, and in the end, that understanding may have sealed his fate. The mystery of Hoffa is not just about where he went, but about how many people needed him to never return. What makes the Jimmy Hoffa case so deeply unsettling is not simply the absence of physical evidence, but the overwhelming presence of silence. Over the years, countless investigators, journalists, former union members, and even individuals connected to organized crime have hinted that they knew fragments of the truth, yet those fragments never aligned into a complete picture. This was not the result of confusion, but coordination. Silence, in this case, was not a failure of memory, but an act of discipline. In worlds governed by power rather than law, silence is not passive, it is enforced.